Good evening. I'm in for Kaitlan Collins, who sat down with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu following his address at the United Nations today and amid what could be a truly historic breakthrough for his country. Netanyahu telling and showing the world earlier what a new Middle East could look like. He says Israel is on the, quote, cusp of a deal with Saudi Arabia that would not only normalize their relations, but encourage other Arab states to do the same and increase prospects of peace with Palestinians. Netanyahu finally met with President Biden Wednesday, their first face-to-face meeting since Netanyahu returned to office. Biden had been keeping his distance, freezing the Israeli leader out for 9 months over his government's highly controversial attempt to overhaul Israel's democratic system and reduce oversight of his government. Here's Kaitlan's one-on-one with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for being here. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
One of the things that you discussed with President Biden when you met here in New York was this potential deal to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. We heard from the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He says he believes that talks are getting closer. How close do you think that they are?
I'm going to plagiarize. I'll say that every day we get closer.
And how close are you today?
Closer than we were yesterday.
Do you feel that a deal is likely?
I think it's possible. I think it's likely because I think Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States share a common goal to change history, to make this quantum leap, another quantum leap for peace. We had one with the Abraham Accords, with the United States, and we now have an opportunity with the United States to change the Middle East forever, to create not only to bring down the walls of enmity, but also to create a corridor of energy pipelines, rail links, fiber optic cables between Asia, through Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel, and the United Arab Emirates. This is an amazing change, and I'm always careful about these things. I'd never exaggerate. I think this is a pivot of history.
It could be pivotal, but of course any deal with Saudi would require something in exchange for the Palestinians. What significant concessions are you willing to make to them?
I don't think it's an exchange. I think they can benefit from this peace. And I think they made a mistake in not joining the Abraham Accords and just, keeping themselves out of it. I think they'd be much wiser to enter this and see how they could be part of the process. Part of the process doesn't mean that they have a veto power over the process, because if they'll have a veto power over the process, if they had one, in the case of the Abraham Accords, we'd never have had the Abraham Accords, and we'd go for another quarter of a century without peace. So no veto power.
But that's what you're not willing to do. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to give the Palestinians specifically?
Well, these are the things that I discuss in discrete forums. In order to get something, a real result, it's much better to bring the entire package at one time. But I will say this, and I think it's important. I think that making peace with Saudi Arabia and basically beginning to end the Arab-Israeli conflict will also help us end the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I think that's what people miss out. They think, oh no, you have to first conclude the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and then go to the Arab world, what is called the inside-out approach. I think it's the outside-in approach that has a much greater chance to end both sets of conflicts, with the Arab states and with the Palestinians.
But what is on the table? Is it opening the U.S. consulate, reopening it in East Jerusalem for Palestinians? Is it freezing the settlements on the West Bank and areas that are earmarked for them? I mean, are those things that are on the table in your view?
Well, first of all, whatever's on the table, I will not jeopardize Israel's national interests and our security. But I also will not jeopardize success by speaking about it publicly, even on CNN.
Okay, so even if you have something in your mind that you're not prepared to say now, that you are willing to give to the Palestinians in order to have this deal happen, how could you get that through, how could you get your coalition government on board with that?
I think people don't understand how our system works. My coalition partners joined me. I didn't join them. And they actually get to be, when you actually look at decisions, what we actually do, they're quite eminent. They're eminently sensible. I mean, they talk a talk, which is obvious. That's what politicians always do.
So they're just talking when your finance minister says no concessions to the Palestinians?
Well, I don't want to say what we'll end up doing, but I think that when we actually come to the, how do you say in baseball? You step to the mat,
to the base?
To the base, whatever, okay. And we have to actually make the decisions, and everybody sees the full package of what it is we bring to the state of Israel, to the Middle East, to ourselves and our neighbors and the world. I think there's a very good chance that everybody will go along.
But that's surprising because, I mean, you hear what your finance minister has said in recent days. He's previously said that the Palestinians don't even exist as a people. I think people have a hard time believing that you could have something where you're giving a significant exchange to the Palestinians and you've also got this coalition on board, even if you say you're the one who makes the decisions here.
Well, I just passed, to make my point, to stress the point, I just had a security cabinet meeting a few weeks ago, and I said our policy is to prevent the collapse of the Palestinian Authority. That's the governing body of the Palestinians in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. And we had a vote, 10 people, 10 members of the Security Cabinet. 8 voted with me, 1 voted against me, and 1 abstained. It passed. And that's my point. When you actually make the decisions, it's the mainstream decisions that ultimately went out. And I think here there'll be, if we are successful in tackling the 4 or 5 main components of this agreement, and I believe we can be, I think you're going to get a groundswell of support in Israel, on the right, on the left, and from the international community.
Would you be willing to blow up your coalition, essentially, to get this deal with Saudi done?
I don't think it'll require that. And I think this
You think they'll go along with it?
Well, it's whether I go along with it.
But
That's
don't they have to come as well?
No, the ultimate test is whether I and my Likud partners believe that this is something that
But even members of your own party have been skeptical of concessions to the Palestinians.
I have a Democratic party, small d. I have a Democratic party. People can say what they will. They even criticize me. Can you imagine? Yeah, I'm supposed to be this great dictator. They can say whatever they want. They get elected not by me, but by 150,000 registered members of the party. They're free to do it. But ultimately, if you look at what I've done over the years, when I was elected, people say I'd destroy the economy. Built up an extraordinary economy with our policy. They said I'll destroy peace. I made 4 peace treaties with 4 Arab states that nobody believed would happen.
But on this deal specifically,
they said I'd go to war. I've been very careful because I've suffered the slings of war. I've lost friends. I lost my brother. I've been very prudent in the way I use military force. And I think that, but decisive when I have to. I think I can, if we overcome these obstacles, and I don't want to minimize them, but if I do, then I think, yes, I think I'll carry my coalition and the country with it.
Well, let's talk about this deal. Would you be okay with the Saudis enriching uranium?
I think that there are major issues there. It's a very complex problem.
So you would not be okay with that?
So I think that what would happen is that we would not do anything in any way that would jeopardize Israel's security. And on this, I have to tell you that I stand shoulder to shoulder with President Biden. We have Israel and America have no daylight between them on this. There's also an American law on this matter. So, this is something that we stand on very strongly. What we can do and what we cannot do. And we have no qualms about either side of it.
Okay, that sounds like a no, but you mentioned President Biden. After your meeting with him this week, the White House said that he, quote, reiterated his concern about any fundamental changes to Israel's democratic system absent the broadest possible consensus. How can you deny the damage that your push for this judicial reform is doing to Israeli-U.S. relations?
Well, I think the damage is not the reform, it's the way the reform is mispresented. So it's some kind of collapse of democracy when all we're talking about is, what we're really talking about is how we choose judges. Now in America, the elected officials, your politicians choose judges that have to be confirmed by your parliament, by the Congress. In Israel, they say that if that happens, there'll be a collapse of democracy.
You think the White House misunderstands what you're proposing?
Well, I hope they understand it better now after this discussion. But I think that the discussion has been crazy. I mean, it's been completely off the rails.
It took. We've never seen it take this long for an Israeli prime minister to meet with a U.S. president, and that meeting didn't even happen at the White House. It happened here on the sidelines of the UN summit. It's very clear that they are concerned with this reform.
Well, they don't hide it, and I don't hide the fact that they do it. But ultimately, it's our democratic decision, which will be prudent and responsible. But I can tell you, it took 9 months, but the meeting was born. And it was a very good meeting. It was a very good meeting. and I think can lead to a successful outcome.
The Supreme Court is obviously considering parts of that judicial overhaul. Can you say that you are willing to abide by whatever it is that the Supreme Court decides?
I think we should abide by the Supreme Court rulings, and the Supreme Court should abide by the basic laws that the Knesset legislates. I think we should keep both sides of this basic bargain of democracy.
That's not a yes or a no.
That's the right answer.
Will you abide by this decision related to this reform specifically?
I want to have us continue to abide by the Supreme Court rulings, and I want the Supreme Court to continue to abide by the basic laws, and that's I think, the correct balance.
I think it's really notable that you won't answer this question. You wouldn't answer it to Wolf Blitzer. You're not answering. I mean, it's a yes or no question.
Well, it's a yes or no question if you also answer the other part, and we haven't answered it. I hope we don't get to that. I don't think we should.
But if they rule tomorrow, what do you do?
Well, let's hope that we both do the prudent thing and remain in the basic principles that guide our democracy. You know, in a democracy, no one power has absolute power over the other powers. In Israel, you know, the Supreme Court has all the checks, but no balance, and it's important to have some kind of balance.
But it's the only check on your coalition, you and your coalition.
No, it's not. It's not. That's not.
What are the other checks?
Well, they can cancel a lot of laws, but they have the power, and do they have the power to cancel basic laws?
But it's so interesting, this argument you're making, because I looked this up. It's not like they kind of use this all the time, that they strike down a lot of laws. I think it's only happened 22 or so times ever.
Yeah, well, that's a lot. In Britain,
since 1997, they've only done it 22 times.
Yeah, but they also issued a decision which empowers the Attorney General to knock down any decision made by the government. Any decision made by the government. Can you imagine a system where the Supreme Court tells the Attorney General of the United States, who could pass from one administration to the next, that you can strike down any decision made by the president?
There are more checks and balances in the
U.S. No, just a minute. Checks and balances. Can you imagine this? And of course not. No country, in no democracy on the planet, do you have such powers for the judiciary, either directly or through their representative in the Attorney General, the legal advisor of the government. In Israel, the legal advisor of the government doesn't advise.
Okay, I just think it's notable that you're not saying yes or no. But I do want to ask you about one other thing.
That one other thing is about former President Trump, who, you may remember, cursed out Netanyahu former President Donald Trump were, of course, once close allies. But what is the status of their relationship now?
When was the last time you spoke to former President Donald Trump?
I got a note from him a few months ago when I won the election.
What did it say?
Congratulations. When I won the election.
He criticized you in an interview with Barack Ravid of Axios. He said that he felt you were disloyal to him because you called to congratulate President Biden on his victory. I mean, he used an expletive. What would you say is the status of your relationship?
I appreciate what the president did, what President Trump did. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He recognized our sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He went out of what I thought was a disastrous Iran agreement. He did these and other things.
So those comments don't bother you?
You know, I've been long enough in the political life to look, to put aside, you know, the periodic ebb and flow of emotion, and to look at the substantive positions that leaders and allies have done, and I respect what was done, and I appreciate it. I don't particularly care for that. I mean, I don't care about it, is the way I would say.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your time today. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Thank you.